อะไรคือข้อพิสูจน์ของน้ำท่วมโลกคือฟอสซิลไดโนเสาร์ทั่วโลกมักถูกค้นพบพร้อมกับกลุ่มสัตว์ทั้ง6คลาสที่น่าคิดก็คือฟอสซิลสัตว์ทะเลอยู่ร่วมกับไดโนเสาร์สัตว์บกอยู่ร่วมกับสัตว์ทุกชนิดทุกทวีปทุกพื้นที่ของทวีปชาวโลกคุ้นตากับเรื่องภูเขาไฟวิสเวียสซึ่งเท่าถล่มเนี่ยได้ถล่มเมืองปอมเปย์โดยฉับพลันผมเองก็มีโอกาสไปดูสถานที่นั้นด้วยเป็นแหล่งท่องเที่ยวอันหนึ่งของอิตาลีแล้วเราเห็นท่าที่เราเรียกว่า life position หรือท่าชีวิตท่าชีวิตเราจะเห็นจะแทรกรูป2รูปที่เป็นท่าชีวิตซึ่งร่างของมนุษย์เนี่ยถูกทำให้กลายเป็นฟอสซิลโดยฉับพลันโดยเท่าฐานจากปอมเปย์ซึ่งร้อนแล้วก็ฆ่าเขาโดยฉับพลันเนี่ยแต่เป็นลักษณะที่เป็นฟอสซิลที่มีลักษณะเป็นหินช็อกฉะนั้นมันลักษณะที่แปลกประหลาดกว่าฟอสซิลอื่นๆและยังคงท่าของชีวิตเนี่ยเก็บไว้อย่างชัดเจนมีเหตุการณ์อีกหนึ่งเหตุการณ์ซึ่งแถลงข่าวเมื่อวันที่ 14 ธันวาคม ปี 2020 ที่จีนมีการแถลงข่าวพบซากไดโนเสาร์ที่เป็นภาพ3มิติหมายความว่ามันสมบูรณ์ออกมาเป็น3มิติเลยไม่ได้แบนๆแล้วก็มันเป็นไดโนเสาร์2ตัวเล็กๆลักษณะของหัวเนี่ยอาจจะคล้ายไปทางนกด้วยซ้ำไปเป็น2ตัวที่ตะเกียกตะกายกันเบียดเสียดกันแสดงว่ามันต้องอยู่ในหลุมอะไรแคบๆหลุมหินแคบๆที่มันตายโดยฉับพลันที่อยู่ดีโคลนก็มาทับถมมันจึงเป็นภาพที่มันตะเกียกตะกายอยู่ร่วมกันก็เป็นภาพที่มีชื่อเสียงมากนะครับอะไรคือข้อพิสูจน์ของน้ำท่วมโลกนักวิทยาศาสตร์ของ The Ark and the Darknessสรุปเอาไว้4ข้อข้อที่1คือการฝังกลบอย่างรวดเร็วของฟอสซิลจำนวนมหาศาลมากกว่า 1,000 ล้านชิ้นอยู่ตามพิพิธภัณฑ์ทั่วโลกฉะนั้นมันมหาศาลจริงๆเพียงแต่มันต้องเป็นแหล่งออกมาจากแหล่งที่ค้นพบแล้วก็เป็นฟอสซิลที่ค้นพบในชั้นดินชั้นหินที่ยังไม่ได้ขุดออกมาเก็บไว้ที่พิพิธภัณฑ์เนี่ยจำนวนมากอะไรเป็นเหตุให้มันถูกฝังกลบโดยฉับพลันอันที่2ก็คือเรื่องของการพบฟอสซิลในไลฟ์โพซิชันท่าชีวิตเนี่ยเช่นกำลังคลอดลูกกำลังกลืนสัตว์อีกตัวหนึ่งกำลังกางปีกหนีอะไรบางอย่างแล้วก็เรื่องที่3คือการพบฟอสซิลสัตว์ทะเลอยู่กลางทวีปซึ่งอันนี้จะเล่าเรื่องประสบการณ์ส่วนตัวก็คือได้มีโอกาสไปดูหินผางามที่จังหวัดเลยเราเรียกว่าคุณหมิงเมืองไทยเนี่ยแล้วที่นั่นเนี่ยเป็นมักคุเทศก์เด็กนักเรียนน่ารักมากนะครับมีเด็กนักเรียนมาช่วยวันหยุดเสาร์อาทิตย์เนี่ยก็มาทำหน้าที่เป็นมักคุเทศก์น้อยนักเรียนคนนี้ก่อนเริ่มเดินก็พาเราเลี้ยวเข้าไปนิดหนึ่งในสมภูมิทุ่มไม้เลยแหละแล้วก็พบก้อนหินและชี้ให้ดูสิ่งที่จริงๆแล้วมันคือทริโบไลท์หรือทริโบไลท์เนี่ยคือไอ้3 ปล้องเนี่ยเพราะว่าตัวของซากดึกดำบรรพ์ซึ่งหลายคนน่าจะคุ้นชินนะเป็น3 ปล้องแล้วมันอยู่ที่จังหวัดเลยที่หินผางามได้อย่างไรมันยังเป็นรอยอยู่ที่ก้อนหินนั้นน่ะ ผมส่วนตัวก็นึกถึงโอ้โหมันน่าจะมีสร้างรั้วเก็บเอาไว้เพราะว่านักท่องเที่ยวจะได้ไม่ไปขุดไม่ไปกระเทาะให้มันเสียหายมันเป็นอะไรที่บุญตาแหละที่เราได้เห็นซากดึกดำบรรพ์ล้านปีที่เขาบอกนะแต่คำถามก็คือทำไมมันไปอยู่บนยอดเขาเหมือนที่มีการค้นพบซากหอยดึกดำบรรพ์ที่จังหวัดน่านถ้าพบที่สุสานหอยที่จังหวัดภูเก็ตเรื่องปกติแต่นี่ไปพบที่จังหวัดน่านแต่เราก็ถูกบอกว่าถูกสั่งสมมาว่าเปลือกโลกเนี่ยยังเคลื่อนตัวอีกทุกๆปีอย่างเช่นภูเขาเอเวอเรสต์ยังสูงขึ้นทุกปีตั้งแต่1 เซนถึง1 นิ้วขึ้นไปเรื่อยๆแล้วก็บอกว่าเปลือกโลกเนี่ยก็ยังเคลื่อนตัวอยู่เราก็นึกว่าโอ้มันคงจะแสดงว่าจังหวัดน่านจังหวัดเลยมันอยู่ใต้ทะเลแล้วก็ค่อยๆเคลื่อนตัวเป็นเวลาหลายล้านปีแล้วก็เชื่อทฤษฎีนั้นปัญหาก็คือไอ้ฟอสซิลประเภทเนี่ยฟอสซิลสัตว์ทะเลอยู่ร่วมกับไดโนเสาร์สัตว์บกอยู่ร่วมกับสัตว์ทุกชนิดซึ่งเดี๋ยวจะดูรายละเอียดต่อไปอีกฉะนั้นมันไปอยู่ร่วมกันทุกทวีปทุกพื้นที่ของทวีปกลางทวีปและแม้แต่ทวีปอาร์กติกเนี่ยยังไปค้นพบซากของฟอสซิลเรื่องสุดท้ายที่นำเสนอเนี่ยคือการเปรียบเทียบโมเดล2 โมเดลอันหนึ่งคือการบันทึกของพระคัมภีร์ Biblical Account กับ Man-made Model โมเดลฝีมือมนุษย์หรือถ้าจะเรียกเป็นภาษาเทคนิคว่า Humanism แต่นี้โมเดลอันไหนที่สามารถอธิบายชั้นหินของเปลือกโลกที่พบได้ดีกว่ากันเพราะว่าแม้แต่โมเดลทฤษฎีฝีมือมนุษย์เนี่ยเพียง40 ปีนี้เองที่อธิบายของชั้นเปลือกหินเนี่ยโดยยอมรับเรื่องอุบัติภัยร้ายแรงเพิ่งมา40 ปีนี้เองแต่ใน2 โมเดลเนี่ย1 โมเดลเท่านั้นที่เป็นจริงและโมเดลที่จะอธิบายชั้นเปลือกหินของเปลือกโลกได้ดีกว่ากันอันนั้นน่ะจะเป็นโมเดลที่จะเป็นของจริงถ้าหากมนุษยชาติตื่นรู้ว่าวงการแพทย์มีผู้เฝ้าประตูหรือผู้คุ้มกฎวงการสื่อก็มีผู้เฝ้าประตูวงการวิชาการก็มีผู้เฝ้าประตูโดยเฉพาะยิ่งวิชาการด้านวิทยาศาสตร์และประวัติศาสตร์เราเชื่อในประวัติศาสตร์ที่เป็นวิทยาศาสตร์หรือจินตนาการทางวิทยาศาสตร์ประวัติศาสตร์ที่เป็นจินตนาการทางวิทยาศาสตร์เนี่ยเป็นประวัติศาสตร์ที่มีลักษณะ thought control ควบคุมความคิดของมนุษย์และเป็น mind police เป็นบอกอะไรถูกอะไรผิด
The second most powerful evidence are the fossils that are in these sedimentary layers. To produce a fossil requires, in most cases, especially for the larger kinds of organisms, requires complete burial and rapid burial. And that automatically speaks of catastrophic conditions. So the fact that we find so many fossils, so well preserved, many of them with evidence that the animals were buried alive, is another powerful evidence for a flood cataclysm.
There's a lot of fossils in museums. In fact, the museums are full. They don't want any more fossils. The basements are full. Museums have collected 1 billion fossils. And scientists suggest that in the rocks, and you could find these, there are trillions of fossils. If you see an animal die along the side of the road, like a possum or a deer, pretty soon that deer or that possum is gone. The bones disintegrate, scavengers come, the mice eat the bones, the pelt falls apart. 10 years later, it's just dust. There's nothing. And yet there's these trillion fossils. Here's why we have a trillion fossils. There was this enormous flood. It was a worldwide flood. Tsunamis were racing across, bringing in sediment and quickly burying these animals. As the flood receded, all this ocean water percolated back through the sand that was covering the animals and provided the minerals to change the bones into fossils. And that's how you get trillions of fossils. You have to have a worldwide flood.
The one thing we frequently observe is that the fossils have been exquisitely preserved. What do I mean by that? Well, we find all the details preserved in place. For example, fish about to swallow another fish and it's been buried. That tells you it had to be very rapid to preserve those details. Another example, we've got ichthyosaurs, which are marine reptiles, some of these up to 6 feet long, and they've been buried in the process of giving birth to a baby. Another case of 10, 12 foot long fish with an undigested fish in its stomach. The details of wings of wasps.
The wings are open and the legs are in the flight position. What can we think about? They were flying, and those insects were trying to escape. They're trying to go somewhere, but they just got trapped with all the sediments of the waters of the flood, and that's why we can study them.
All these details require extremely rapid burial. It fits exactly with what the Bible says. It's consistent. The destruction of the flood was rapid, sudden, catastrophic on a global scale, preserving these creatures sometimes in life positions, caught in the action of doing something, and the details exquisitely preserved. That's consistent with the biblical record of the flood.
It may surprise you to learn that all of the rock layers of the world, the named rock layers like the Cambrian, the Jurassic, all of the layers of the world have saltwater creatures. Well, what greater proof would you need that this was from a worldwide flood, that there's saltwater creatures in all the layers? Now, this is in the middle of the continents. How did these saltwater creatures get here? It would have to be a flood. Now, the evolution scientists have to explain where these saltwater creatures came from, how they got there. You're saying, Mr. Evolution Scientist, that there's saltwater creatures in all these layers, and you're saying the oceans rose, covered the middle of the United States, and went back down, went back up, went back down, multiple times, at least a dozen times. Occam's razor would say, it's more simple to believe in one flood than more than a dozen worldwide floods.
It was in the 1980s that the secular geologists began to move to catastrophism and move away from uniformitarianism as soon as it suited their needs. They went to catastrophism when it served their purposes to help explain the extinction of the dinosaurs.
Noah's flood provides a better explanation for the demise of the dinosaurs than the impact in Yucatan, simply because that event is so small, so localized, there's no way it could have a physical effect that would cause the dinosaurs to be buried the way we find them. And nobody in the secular world even claims that. They say, well, it produced climate change that caused the dinosaurs to starve to death.
If you go on Wikipedia today and look up dinosaur extinction or Chicxulub crater, an asteroid sunk and hit the Earth, caused a global cooling because of all the dust in the air, and the dinosaurs died out at that time.
We have simulations where we've thrown the Chicxulub-sized meteorite onto Earth using high-performance computing, and then we get the subduction event, and we get the breakup of the lithosphere, and we start the earthquakes, we start the volcanoes. Actually, meteoritic impacts could have initiated that event.
But it has no power to explain the burial of these huge animals in the sediment record.
In the 1980s, secular scientists began to theorize that it was an asteroid that crashed into the Earth and wiped out nearly all of life on its surface. The theory posits that massive tsunamis and volcanic dust-filled air as a result of the impact are what destroyed the dinosaurs and most other life in a worldwide disaster. Secular scientists could not escape the fact that water and volcanism played a massive role in how life was once wiped out on Earth. But the Bible had already written that the Earth had been catastrophically destroyed through volcanism and water, and they didn't want to validate the Bible. So they came up with their own catastrophic version of events, i.e., the asteroid impact theory. You see, the Bible's book of Genesis had already made clear what happened in the past in detail, describing volcanic activity bursting open from the ocean floors, chronicling when the volcanic activity began and ceased, how long the rain poured, how high the waters reached, as well as giving the very reason why God judged and destroyed the world with the flood in the first place. You are essentially given two choices today. On the one hand, you have a book written thousands of years ago giving an amazingly detailed account of a worldwide flood that wiped out virtually all life on Earth. On the other hand, you have man-made theories, in this case, one that was only first postulated about 40 years ago due to the inadequacy of their prior non-catastrophic models that they know really didn't work. Both views require a catastrophic event with global implications, but only one has the power to actually explain the stratification of the Earth's surface and the trillions of fossils, along with cultures around the world citing a global flood in their historical writings and legends, while the other merely rearranges elements from the true account to concoct its own story. Think about it. The Bible already said long ago that the entire world's surface was destroyed catastrophically. They have no choice but to make that same claim. The Bible said that the continents were once together in the beginning. It looks like they have to share that too. Nearly all animal life on Earth was wiped out during the destruction, a fact that they also couldn't ignore. Marine life was scattered across the world. The Bible says the waters went above the highest mountains. Secular scientists formulated their own theories as to how to explain the marine fossils away. The Earth's original environment was permanently destroyed. The pre-flood paradise was gone. In the secular model, they refer to this as the prehistoric world going extinct. And let's not forget that the flood set the processes into motion for much of the world to be frozen over. Hot oceans produce evaporations and greater snowfall. Volcanoes send volumes of aerosols into the atmosphere, blocking the sun. Greater snowfall with cooler summers results in global ice sheets. Evolutionists have called these results of the flood the Ice Age. One of these is constantly being proven true as more and more evidence is discovered over time, while the other was only invented after the evidence was unearthed. And further still, contained within the Bible, is also the prediction that all of this would happen. In the second book of Peter, we are told that in the last days, which is the time fast approaching, unbelievers would be willingly ignorant of the flood, meaning that secular men and women would consciously choose to believe and create lies that allow them to push the catastrophic event into the distant past, so long ago and so far away it ceases to be scientific history and becomes scientific fantasy. The irony can only be described as biblical. The Bible makes it clear that the end times would be characterized by increasing unbelief of the biblical account of history and the flood event itself. Sadly, the religion of evolution is one in which its priests are constantly updating their outdated theories, while in the Bible, we are given the final, true, and unchanging account. And as the evidence is unearthed over time, the biblical account is always proven to be true.
แต่นี้มีอีก2เรื่องซึ่งเป็นข้อพิสูจน์ข้อที่5กับที่6ซึ่งสำคัญมากข้อที่5เนี่ยคือฟอสซิลไดโนเสาร์ทั่วโลกมักถูกค้นพบพร้อมกับกลุ่มสัตว์ทั้ง6คลาสที่เราเรียนในชีววิทยาพวกสัตว์ไม่มีกระดูกสันหลังสัตว์เลื้อยคลานสัตว์น้ำสัตว์บกแมมมอลพวกเนี้ยทั้ง6คลาสจะพบพร้อมกับสัตว์ไดโนเสาร์แล้วก็ที่น่าคิดก็คือทำไมสัตว์น้ำไปขุดค้นพบพร้อมกับไดโนเสาร์ทั่วโลกซึ่งในสารคดีนี้จะบอกว่าทำไมเวลาเขาขุดพบด้วยกันเนี่ยทำไมไม่นำแสดงในพิพิธภัณฑ์ให้มันอยู่ติดกันหรือเอาก้อนที่ขุดพบทั้งหมดเนี่ยก็ยังบอกถึงมันมีผู้คุ้มกฎหรือผู้เฝ้าประตูความจริงเนี่ยเอาไว้
If you go to a museum today and look at the dinosaur displays, you'll notice that the animals look strange and unusual with the dinosaurs. Have you ever seen a boa constrictor at a museum display wrapped around a T-Rex's leg? No, but they have found boa constrictors with dinosaurs. Have you ever seen a box turtle at the feet of a Stegosaurus? No, but they found box turtles with dinosaurs. Have you ever seen a T-Rex with a duck flying over him? No, but ducks have been found with dinosaurs. All 7 groups of animals today have been found with the dinosaurs and they look the same. Museum displays don't show that. So if they actually put the animals they found with the dinosaurs, people would look at those displays and say, well, evolution hasn't occurred, it's just the dinosaurs went extinct. But scientists have withheld the modern animals from their dinosaur displays to promote the idea that evolution occurred.
You know, the soft tissue analysis in dinosaurs that's been recent has been a little bit of an enigma to those who believe that the Earth and the universe is really old. Mary Schweitzer in the 1990s and the early 2000s first found this like elastic material in arteries. Elastic material means you pull it and it reloads back to its original place.
Dinosaur soft tissue is a very recent finding. They don't want it really getting out. It's not in any of the textbooks. This lady cracked open or cut open one of the bones and you could smell the putrefaction. Dinosaur bones shouldn't smell like they're dying because they've been dead for millions of years, right?
Well, a little bit later, Mark Armitage started looking at the horn of the Triceratops, but he found bone materials, tissue and bone, the osteocytes that actually you pull it and it had strains. Strains are how much you deform something. It had up to almost 100% strain.
Muscle tissue in the Santanaraptor fossil, and it was like dinosaur beef jerky on the leg bone of a dinosaur. It was the actual muscle.
And this Thescelosaurus bone, the same thing. We started looking inside of this bone and we found using scanning electron microscopy that it had elastic material, it had tissue. You pull it apart and it goes back. If this was mineralized or it was a fossil that became a rock, you couldn't do this. So it was never mineralized, never petrified. It was still elastic, meaning it was still the tissue. That means this thing is not 100 million years old.
The biblical account expects to find some of that stuff. So like what was it? Bone marrow?
Red blood cells,
Cartilage?
collagen,
Hemoglobin?
and muscle fiber proteins. These things shouldn't be able to last but 100,000 years tops. But these things were 100 million years old. Okay, 68 million years old, but closer to 100 million. The amino acids in the protein strands would unbuckle and fall apart into protein powder, and there is no explanation to this day. Nothing that makes any decent scientific sense, and it's just been left as an anomaly. Neil deGrasse Tyson interviewed Mary Schweitzer and some others, and then turned the attention to the medullary layer. They tried to distract the attention away from the red blood cells. The medullary layer was there showing that the T-Rex that this bone came from was at the time carrying eggs. That's really what we call a shell game, a smoke and mirrors game. a dog and pony show meant to distract away from the elephant in the room, which was there were proteins in that T-Rex bone. Now, Mark Armitage, working at University of California, did find soft tissue inside of a Triceratops horn, and when he published that finding, they fired him. So they are willingly ignorant, squelching the truth, and this is actually not science. This is propaganda. Now we're talking about thought control and the mind police. They wanted to fire him because they felt that this was a religious position when really he had only brought forth a scientific discovery.
Well, Kevin, what did you find then when you were looking at the sample and you actually found some tissue?
Okay, here's what we found. Here we have a piece of the horn that has been decalcified, like what I just showed you over on the bench. Mark Armitage was our microscopist working on this, and Mark then took a piece of the decalcified horn and put it under a microscope. See the fibrous material there? That's part of the composition of the bone matrix itself. But what's really of interest is see the white material here on the surface swaying back and forth? That's actual dinosaur tissue on the surface. See, this is not a solid fossil. This has got tissue characteristic to it. See, notice how it flexes back. And that's, of course, very interesting, how you pull on it, flexes back, pull on it, flexes back. That's characteristic of tissue. That's what tissue would do. Now, Mark then was able to extract some very thin layers of elastic material away from the inner core of the horn. But he didn't have to decalcify the horn in order to do this. You can see it's stretchy, it's flexible. In fact, look, notice, see how it's stretching? It's stretching almost to twice its original size of what it was. See, this again is original dinosaur tissue that he's peeled directly from the fossil. There was no decalcification that he did first. See, this is how accessible this tissue was. He didn't have to remove any fossilized bone to get to this tissue. Okay, now, here is a light microscope picture of the tissue itself. You can see the texture of it. And in fact, see, notice the arrows, they're pointing to cells. These cells specifically are what we call osteocytes. Those are bone cells. They're involved in making bone, because even though we think of bone as a rock, bone is tissue. Bone is not a rock. In fact, in our bodies, bone is replaced about every 10 years. To keep it all fresh and the new matrix laid down and such. So it's constantly being changed, and that's what those cells do. And if you look at them then at a closer magnification, what we see then, this is using scanning electron microscopy, you see the extreme detail of the cells. See how well that's preserved? I mean, that doesn't speak for something that has been degrading or something that has just been in a non-pristine condition for 65, 70 million years. We would not begin to expect to see such enormous and elaborate detail. I mean, these structures are incredibly small. You know, this is our 20 micron bar here. See how small these structures are, still intact. And yet to see that kind of detail, then obviously the preservation process is surprising really to everybody. But I think as creationists, we have a lot less to explain than someone trying to suggest that this is, 65, 70 million years of age.
เอาละต่อมาสิ่งที่เป็นฮือฮาที่สุดทุกคนคงรู้เรื่อง Jurassic Park มันเป็นการค้นพบเป็นการสร้างภาพยนตร์จากจินตนาการนะครับแล้วออกมาบอกว่าเนื่องจากยุงตัวหนึ่งเนี่ยไป ดูดเอาเลือดของไดโนเสาร์แล้วเราไปขุดค้นพบนี่เป็นหนังนะครับฉะนั้นเป็นจินตนาการมันถูกเก็บรักษาไว้ในอัมพันธ์ก้อนใหญ่ในภาพยนตร์จะเห็นอัมพันธ์ก้อนใหญ่แล้วมียุงตัวหนึ่งอยู่แล้วเขาบอกว่าจากนั้นเนี่ยเขาก็ไปดูดเอา DNA ของเลือดเนื่องจากมันอยู่ในอัมพันธ์สร้างไม่ให้มันให้ DNA ยังมีชีวิตอยู่เอาละฉะนั้นไอ้เรื่องที่ใหญ่ข้อที่6เนี่ยเรื่องการค้นพบไดโนเสาร์มีเนื้อเยื่ออ่อน soft tissue มันกลายเป็นสิ่งที่ทำให้นักวิทยาศาสตร์ต้องทำ damage control คือควบคุมความจริงเอาไว้เนี่ยเอาละตอนนี้ เรากลับมาเรื่อง Jurassic Park มีการค้นพบในปี 1991 ชื่อแมรี่สเวตเซอร์ได้พบเมล็ดเลือดแดงในกระดูกของฟอสซิลไดโนเสาร์ T-Rex ตั้งแต่ 1991 และเนี่ยเรียกว่าทำให้วงการทฤษฎีวิวัฒนาการเนี่ยไม่ไปต่อไม่เป็นเขาก็ทำ damage control โดยควบคุมตัวนักวิทยาศาสตร์ไม่ให้พูดเลยเถิดนะครับฉะนั้นท่านไปติดตามได้แมรี่สเวตเซอร์นะครับในปี 1991 อยู่ใน YouTube มากมายแล้วก็ 4 ปีที่แล้วนี่เองอีกในเดือนมีนาคณะบรรพชีวินวิทยาจากนานาชาติตีพิมพ์รายงานล่าสุดในนิตยสาร Nature ระบุว่าได้ค้นพบซากฟอสซิลส่วนหัวของไดโนเสาร์ตัวเล็กคล้ายนกฝังอยู่ในก้อนอัมพันธ์ที่มีอายุเก่าแก่ถึง 99 ล้านปีเอาละฉะนั้นตอนนี้จินตนาการเนี่ยเจอจริงแล้วเจอหัวไดโนเสาร์เลยไม่ต้องไปเจอยุงแล้วแต่เรื่องของเรื่องก็คือไอ้ตัวเนื้อเยื่อเนี่ยยังมีนักวิทยาศาสตร์อีกหลายคนพบแล้วมันไม่เพียงแต่เม็ดเลือดไม่เพียงแต่ตัวเนื้อเยื่อซึ่งมีลักษณะยืดหยุ่นได้ดึงออกอิลาสติกเด้งดึงเหมือนยางค้นพบคอลลาเจนเอาละตรงเนี้ยพูดไม่ออกว่าไอ้เม็ดเลือดแดงเนี่ยถ้าท่านไปดูใน YouTube เนี่ยเขาก็ damage control โดยบอกว่ามันมีสารตัวหนึ่งที่ทำให้เม็ดเลือดแดงยังสามารถรักษาโฮโมโกลบินอะไรได้นี่เขา control ไปแต่ตอนนี้นักวิทยาศาสตร์หลายคนพบคอลลาเจนซึ่งคอลลาเจนในซากไดโนเสาร์คอลลาเจนในการยอมรับของวิทยาศาสตร์ไม่สามารถมีอายุหรือมีลักษณะเป็นคอลลาเจนได้นะเกิน 10,000 ปีหรือ 100,000 ปีฉะนั้นมันตั้งแต่1 ปีถึง 100,000 ปีที่ยอมรับโดยทั่วไปอย่างสูงสุด 100,000 ปีทำไมไปเจอคอลลาเจนในซากไดโนเสาร์จูราสสิกพาร์คซึ่งอยู่66 ล้านปี70 ล้านปีอันนี้เป็นเรื่องปวดหัวของนักวิทยาศาสตร์การค้นพบอันนี้น่าจะเป็นโอกาสสำคัญที่เราหลุดเป็นอิสระจาก mindset เรื่องวิวัฒนาการทฤษฎีวิวัฒนาการซึ่งเป็นสมมุติฐานกันเสียที
2005 when Dr. Mary Schweitzer, a paleontologist from the United States, discovered soft tissue inside the femur of a Tyrannosaurus rex that was supposedly 70 million years old. The inside of the bone wasn't completely filled up with minerals as is usual. And Dr. Schweitzer's team from Montana State University used chemicals to dissolve the bony matrix, revealing the soft tissue still present. Using a pair of tweezers, she demonstrated on camera that the material inside the bone was actually soft and stretchy, completely unfossilized. And then she reported that there were also the remains of blood and blood vessels still intact inside as well. She's been quoted as saying that the blood vessels were flexible and in some instances you could squeeze out their contents. Furthermore, she said the microstructures that look like cells are preserved in every way. Another portion of the tissue was described as flexible and resilient, and when stretched, returns to its original shape. On top of the many dragon legends from people groups worldwide and the copious amounts of petroglyphs, carvings, and other artwork indicating that people have seen dinosaurs throughout history, other than finding a human and dinosaur skeleton buried together, you could hardly think of more conclusive evidence of dinosaurs living recently rather than millions of years ago. Schweitzer's team had presented solid evidence this was indeed soft tissue inside a dinosaur, and a North Carolina State University article confirmed. Colleagues at Harvard successfully sequenced the dinosaur protein that Schweitzer had extracted from the tissue, identifying the amino acids and confirming that the material from the T-Rex was collagen. From a paleo standpoint, sequence data really is the nail in the coffin that confirms the preservation of these tissues, Schweitzer says. This bombshell report ignited a firestorm surrounding the creation-evolution debate, as biblical creationists like myself began eagerly presenting the pictures shown in Science magazine to audiences at our presentations to help demonstrate that the facts we see in God's world match the history we read in God's Word in Genesis, which includes a young earth and no mention of the story of evolution. Again, this was powerful evidence that the poster boys for evolution, dinosaurs, hadn't died out millions of years ago, because there's simply no way soft tissue could survive that long, especially in an environment like Hell Creek in Montana, where it was found. She admitted as much in a Discovery Channel TV show, discussing what her reaction was upon first observing what was inside the bone.
Blood vessels.
There they are.
Transparent, hollow, pliable, flexible, branching blood vessels that contain small round red microstructures floating in the vessels. I said, this is not possible. Do it again. When you think about it, the laws of chemistry and biology and everything else that we know say that it should be gone. It should be degraded completely.
However, shortly thereafter, the biofilm brigade got permanently silenced as Schweitzer's team made an even more staggering discovery in 2009. This time, they found soft tissue, blood, and proteins inside of a supposedly 80-million-year-old hadrosaur, a duck-billed dinosaur. And to quell all doubts, due to the aggressive pushback she'd received from her fellow evolutionists the first time, despite her reputation as a careful and experienced scientist, Schweitzer's team was meticulous in their work, making sure to account for anything that could discredit her research. The chief of the Division of Matrix Biology at BIDMC, an independent lab used to verify the find, reported, "Because I'm a collagen biochemist, our lab was contacted to perform an independent analysis of this new bone find. We isolated the proteins, collagen, laminin, and elastin from the bone and also extracted bone cells and blood vessels from this sample. Our findings demonstrated that it did contain basement membrane matrix." National Geographic had an article titled, "Many Dino Fossils Could Have Soft Tissue Inside." And by 2015, evolutionists were reporting on how an accidental discovery of blood and collagen in several dinosaur bones could rewrite textbooks. They further said, "It suggests that nearly every fossil science studied in the past century could contain similarly well-preserved blood and tissue samples." All this to say, soft tissues have been found in dinosaurs or dinosaur era, according to the evolutionary timeline, creatures now well over 100 times. These have been found in many different types of organisms, ranging from dinosaurs to mammals, birds, plants, reptiles, amphibians, clams, insects, and arthropods, sponges, and worm fossils. Not only that, but they've also been found all over the world, from China to Mongolia to Russia, Madagascar, Europe, the UK, and all over North and South America. Which means they've been exposed to a wide variety of environmental conditions: cold, hot, wet, and dry. And even further, they've been found throughout the entire fossil record, from the Cambrian to the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous periods. And they've also been found at different levels, the oldest being a marine worm claimed to be 551 million years old. All of this is totally devastating to the entire evolutionary narrative. Indeed, there's been a spat of popular level articles claiming that Dr. Schweitzer and others may have found the answer to the soft tissue issue. For example, Schweitzer has proposed that iron might help preserve dinosaur soft tissue, both by helping to cross-link and stabilize the proteins, as well as acting as an antioxidant. She's tested this idea and published articles to summarize her new hypothesis. Schweitzer's latest research shows that the presence of hemoglobin, the iron-containing molecule that transports oxygen in red blood cells, may be the key to both preserving and concealing original ancient proteins within fossils. But far from being a threat to biblical creationists, this may well be a plus. Because this type of research may eventually help explain how such fragile things could possibly last the approximately 4,400 years since Noah's flood. Because the facts fit perfectly with a worldwide event that essentially, simultaneously within a year, buried billions of creatures together rapidly and completely just a short while ago.
In 1993, a film titled Jurassic Park featured a rather famous scene in which the remains of an ancient mosquito were preserved, encased in a ball of hardened amber. The film goes on to explain that the way scientists could resurrect dinosaurs from the past was by extracting blood from the remains inside this mosquito, in which dinosaur DNA could be fully sequenced, by combining what was missing with that of a modern-day frog. This idea came about because back in the 90s, the writer Michael Crichton was struggling to come up with a concept to explain how dinosaurs could somehow be brought back to life in a feasible way in his book of the same title. What the Jurassic Park creators couldn't have imagined was the discovery of soft tissue inside of a dinosaur bone, a finding that has since been replicated by other scientists, such as this stretching Triceratops tissue, discovered by Mark Armitage. These discoveries shocked the entire paleontological community and would likely have rewritten the original Jurassic Park film had they known this was possible at the time. In fact, scientists have run into major challenges when attempting to publish these findings because of the wholesale rejection that dinosaur soft tissue could even still exist. The consensus at the time agreed that it was completely impossible, because everyone held to the widespread belief that the bones were millions of years old, which would require that all of their biomaterial had long since fossilized. There was simply no way that these dinosaur bones contained biomaterial like blood vessels and proteins such as collagen. In fact, of the 16 types of bioorganic materials that have since been discovered inside dinosaur bones, collagen by itself ends the debate on these bones being millions of years old, as the maximum age of collagen is as low as 10,000 years by some estimates and as high as 900,000 years by others, with 100,000 years being the generally agreed upon maximum age. To put this into perspective, if each of these tiny bars represents a period of 100,000 years, then only one of these bars represents the maximum age collagen could survive over time. If we zoom out to the time span of 100 million years, then we can see that the lifespan of collagen is 1,000 times shorter than the general age evolutionists claim dinosaur bones are. Or another way to say it is that collagen doesn't even last 0.001% as long as it would have to in order for evolution theory to work, proving that it's not even remotely within the realm of possibility that collagen could survive for so long. The relatively short shelf life of collagen proves what the Bible has been saying about these bones all along, that they're roughly 4,400 years old and were buried all over the world around the time of Noah's flood. as the floodwaters began to recede, the earth was in a state of chaos. Dinosaur graveyards like these would later be found all over the earth, and secular paleontologists agree that these worldwide sites share one thing in common. The state the bones are found in all show evidence of flood burial. And now you understand exactly where the water came from. Water that would eventually dry up because it didn't belong there in the first place. The whole earth would undergo a massive reset as vegetation would slowly grow back and water would find its final resting places. Sadly, the earth that was once a perfect habitat for dinosaurs was now irrevocably ruined, and those dinosaurs that were able to survive would be hunted to extinction over time. We know them as dinosaurs, but legend would remember them as dragons. And so it was that on the 17th day of the 7th month, the ark rested upon the mountains of Ararat. It was a little over a year after the flood began that Noah, his family, and all on board the ark would finally step onto dry land again. This group of 8 people would repopulate the earth, just as legends around the world cite in their historical literature. And science would later prove that this genetic bottleneck really did occur, exactly as the Bible had told us all along.
หากใครดูจบแล้วฝากกดไลค์กดแชร์และกด subscribe ให้ด้วยนะครับ